So next up, I'm going to introduce kind of what we're going to do with this as a bit of a clinical study. Okay, um, I I first though want to point out for the record on the video here, because I know I talked to you a second ago, but I want to get it on video. What I changed. So basically, I went back into the model and I applied the white glass material to the landscape layer. So what that did was it just created the reflective surface here. And it also, believe it or not, guys, it also helped to brighten up the image a little bit. So now you've got a more stark contrast between what I have for my ocean item, and then my sky is sort of still the same kind of blending with the ocean thing. But those are just default materials right now. They're still gray. We haven't quite gotten there. So I want you to leave yours gray for now. We'll discuss that probably next week, to work on like environment mapping and stuff like that. But I do want you to make your actual ground plane for your building. So that entire hillside or mountainside or whatever you put it on, whatever you want to call it, I would like you to make your ground plane the white glass material. Okay, so that way we're going to be able to see the reflections. We'll be able to see what your materials look like as it gets pushed through multiple different instances of light, I guess you could say. And so that's going to be an integral part of what we do. Any questions on that? Simple enough, I didn't really change all that much. Everything else stays the same. So then what we're going to do for our actual assignment is we're going to basically just kind of create like I said, a clinical study. We're going to look at these different settings and actually apply them sort of in a side-by-side sort of condition. So I don't want you to get too hung up on the resolution of your image. I'm going to try to figure out why it's not quite working from one system to the next here. But what we're going to wind up with is 3 8.5 by 11 sheets. Those 3 8.5 by 11 sheets are going to have 3 images on them. I say 3 images, but they're not really going to be 3 images. It's going to be 3 sections of the same image. And I want you to be sure that you pick a portion of your image that has your building, right? So basically I want to see building elements . I don't know what it's going to look like, but I want to see bits and pieces of your building and reflections. So if this is the ground plane, I've got building and I've got reflection, right? I want to see bits and pieces of it in all 3. Okay, so this is one image that gets split up into 3. Okay, and I'll show you a bit of a technique for doing that in a little while, but you guys can start pulling open, Photoshop or Illustrator, whatever your preferred media is or software is, and you can start setting it up as we move forward here. So there's going to be 3 of them for 3 different studies, and these are going to be the studies: the ISO setting, the shutter setting, and the color temperature setting. So like I said, I want you to stick to about 10%-ish of going back and forth. So the ISO starts off at 100%. So I want you to be looking at 90, 100, and 110. For the shutter, I want you to look at 30, 33, and 36. And for the color temperature, I want you to look at 6,000, 6,500, and 7,000. Okay, so what I would suggest is to basically do all of these in either straight order, where you're at 90, 30, 6,000, 100, 33, 6,500. You can start there and just kind of push 3 of them out just like that. Then if you either aren't getting enough variation or you want to explore it a little bit further, I suggest taking one of these and reversing it, so that in ISO you have 110 but in Shutter you have 30. Okay, so when you reverse them, what you're going to get is kind of you're going to push and pull some of the contrast either in the what's the word I'm thinking of, saturation of a color, or the brightness, anything like that. So you can get some different kinds of push and pull for the quality of the image there. Okay, so that's the assignment, but I also kind of want to inspire you guys a little bit with this, and I'm going to be working with you through a few things for the rest of the class here, but I do want to introduce sort of what we're trying to get to, in a way. So this is an interesting, very basic image. It's just a simple digital environment that's being studied. And so you see that the water is reflecting the building, right? So that water feature is a huge feature of the rendering. And so it's important to be able to communicate that when necessary. However, as you start to develop more detail and stuff, the water feature is less important, but still, kind of lends itself to the believability of the image and the applicability of it as an element. This isn't what we're doing. This is far more, photoreal, pseudo-photoreal than we're trying to attain. But we are going to look at something closer to this, hopefully. I'm hoping we'll get to almost this quality, where maybe not so much in the materials, but the reflections. And we have a few very, very subtle reflections down here that, in my opinion, really anchor that building down and give it a real connection to the ground plane. Okay, so I know you might think that that's counterintuitive, but it really does help. As we look at a few more, you'll kind of get what I mean. So these ones are mostly just light-based. The light kind of reflects down, and you don't see too much. If any of you have taken a class with Robert Perkins or taken a rendering class with him at some point, he really speaks to these sort of like dusk and dawn images very well. So it's super dramatic. But you're also going to see stuff like this where, if you're trying to create realistic cityscapes or settings, it really comes into play because, if you have rain on the ground, it reflects the building instantly, even in an urban environment. So what I also wanted to show you is a few instances where that doesn't occur and how it starts to feel like the building is not connected. And now this one is kind of a really bad example because it's like the shadows aren't really real and the perspective looks a little off to me. But I just wanted you to sort of see how this building doesn't exactly look like it's attached. And some of them aren't so bad. Like this one is actually a pretty decent, more photoreal kind of rendering, but it still feels like a rendering. It feels like I'm either in like a dream or, like I'm not looking at something that has a reality to it. And, this one too. So it just gets really hard to take a simple, even this one, it's just asphalt, right? It's kind of close to the quality of what we're going to use, right? Like you can't really see the granularity of the texture. And so without having something that pulls it down into plane, shows you if there's a slope somewhere, you can't really tell whether or not your building is A, in perspective, or B, attached to the ground. So just giving you something to think about why the reflections are so important. Any questions? So jumping back then to what you see here, you can't really tell so much by the perspective that I chose that we're sloping downhill. You kind of can because you're seeing the edge of the building, right? Like this is smaller than that side, or sort of kind of. But the reflection really helps. So the fact that this is leaning is straight up, but it's kind of tilting a little bit off that way is showing us that it's sort of sloping out there to a small degree. Okay, so it's a huge signifier that you've got some slope in the ground when you can see that, and also back there. So anyway, yeah. So let me stop this video here. I am going to troubleshoot that resolution issue. And what I would suggest is you guys get started setting that up or playing with your export settings, picking the right view. What I want to be sure of is that you don't take this image. Let me just do something real quick. Hang on. I want to be sure that you don't take an image like this and then cut it up like that and like that. Because this one doesn't tell me anything. Okay? I want you to take something more like this image and split it up like this and like that. Okay? No, it does have to be exterior though. I haven't, let me write it on this thing. Okay. A marker. Yeah, it should definitely be an exterior rendering. For this case. The reason is once you start to put yourself in an interior environment, it becomes very, very important to understand emitters and internal lighting, something secondary to the sun. I know that we have a lot of translucency in this building, and so it might still look good now, but it won't in the future once we start to really look at that opacity issue. Okay? Any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to start off with like a, I guess, 20-minute sort of work session with everyone. Call me if you need a little bit of assistance getting set up, or if you have any, yes?
For Photoshop or Illustrator, whichever one we use, the resolution should be 300.
No, let's go with 150 for now.
Okay.
I got to troubleshoot that resolution issue because I want us to be rendering at a much higher resolution than the viewport setting.
Okay.
Yeah. Alrighty.